The internet doesn't wait for the truth.
You think they're going to be on some rookie shit like that? Bro, they fucked up the case 45 times. It should have been a mistrial. Even if he got convicted, he was going to get off on appeal. 100% no way, no how. Feds don't move like that.
One leaked interrogation tape. And young Thug, the same man who told the world, never snitch,
stay gangster.
I always tell a nigga,
that's all I'm saying.
I tell my whole hood, you know the police can't give you no time.
Stay gangster.
So don't tell them then. When they lock you up and they want to question you or anything, just at least buck on them. Like, make them feel like you ain't gonna tell. Like,
is suddenly stamped with the very label he used to throw at others. For him, this isn't just gossip. It's his empire, his credibility, his crown on trial all over again.
Yeah, the film in court came out and, you know, of course his lawyer wrote that. He didn't write that. His lawyer probably wrote that. But now in these days, when you got the camera, it just look like, you know, they're going to say you pushing pleas. Because, I mean, in this business, if you turn into a rat, it's kind of like career's over.
But to understand how the king slime of Atlanta got here, we have to rewind. Back to the moment when silence wasn't just respected, it was survival. December 2022. Gunna, Thug-S protege, takes an Alford plea.
You should have went in there and kept your mouth closed.
Gunna applied for bail 90 times. They denied him every time until you said what we needed you to say. And now you can leave.
Boy, we got Gunna, one of the biggest rappers, goddammit, done agreed to cooperate and stood before the court and said, Your Honor, I want to make this clear. Y'all the gang, right? Yes, ma'am. And you did wrong, right?
In court, he admits YSL was a gang, even while maintaining his own innocence. 2 words, yes, ma'am, echo louder than any verse he ever recorded. Overnight, Gunna becomes the face of betrayal. Collaborators back away. Fans flood timelines with 1 word, and through all of it, Thug stays silent. That silence becomes its own statement. To the streets, it means, I won't fold. I won't break. I'll stand taller than the rest. For years, Thug had been more than just a rapper. He was unpredictable, flamboyant, sometimes incoherent, but always magnetic. He wore skirts and carried rifles in the same week. He sang about love, then threatened rivals in the next bar. To his fans, that contradiction wasn't weakness, it was strength. It made him untouchable, larger than life, a man who could bend rules and still run the game. And above all, he preached loyalty, over and over again. He told his people, stay gangster, don't tell, buck on the police. To his followers, these weren't just words, they were commandments. To prosecutors, they were proof of a gang leader's influence. Either way, the myth of young Thug only grew. But myths are fragile. The louder you preach the code, the harsher the world judges you if you're accused of breaking it. The YSL case, it wasn't small, it was massive. 28 names, charges of robbery, carjackings, even murder. Each week, another affiliate took a deal, and each time, Thug looked more like the last pillar holding the empire. Every plea deal made him shine brighter, until the spotlight burned too hot. This is the cruel irony of hip-hop's no-snitch code. If you hold it down, you might lose your freedom, but come home to applause. Bobby Shmurda did years behind. Bars in return to love, even if his numbers never recovered. If you talk, you might save yourself, but your career bleeds out instantly. 6ix9ine In is the perfect example. Music that still charts, but respect that never returns. And that's the impossible weight Thug carried. He wasn't just another artist, he was the face of Atlanta's new generation. The man prosecutors painted as a criminal mastermind, and fans painted as the last real one left. Every move he made mattered. Every silence was studied. Every quote became a prophecy. But here's the truth. No one says the code was never designed for courtrooms with cameras and microphones.
But the state offered him 15 years on probation, but they keep piling on these conditions. He just said, he made up his mind. He said, I'm just gonna go with it. I gotta get home.
I take full responsibility for my crimes or my charges. I wanna say sorry to my family, my mom. My mom got 11 kids. I can't say all their names, you know. My managers, my kids that's not here. Really, everybody that got something to do with this situation, I want to say sorry for just like, you know, having so much time investing into this, you know. And
It was built in alleys and back rooms where nothing was recorded. It survives on mystery. It dies on tape. So, when talk of an interrogation surfaced, people didn't wait for context. 2 hours in a room with police, to the culture, that was all it took. The same sermons that once crowned him now turned into weapons against him. His own words, "never tell," came back like boomerangs. That's the paradox of young Thug. The things that made him larger than life, his contradictions, his boldness, his bravado, also left him no room to fail. The code elevated him, but the code is unforgiving. The minute someone suggests he broke it, even for a second, the empire trembles, and that's where the story shifts. The king, who once embodied silence, now has his every word dissected. The man who warned others about betrayal now faces whispers of betrayal himself. So the question is simple and brutal. If even young Thug, the man who built his empire on loyalty, can be caught talking in that room, then what does that say about the code itself? Because maybe the truth is this: the code only works if people believe in it. And once the belief cracks, the crown slips. And for young Thug, the cracks are already showing. 2 hours. That's how long young Thug sat in an interrogation room with the police. No phone, no entourage, no escape. Just him, 4 walls. And questions designed to break anyone down. When the footage leaked in 2025, the reaction was instant. The internet didn't care about strategy or context. It didn't matter if he said something small or nothing at all. 2 hours on tape was enough. In a culture built on silence, the very image of Thug sitting there, nodding, talking, pausing, was all fans needed to turn doubt into betrayal. This was the same man who once told his hood, "Don't ever tell, just buck on the police." The man who turned loyalty into an anthem. Now the headlines screamed, "Did Thug snitch?" And like every scandal in hip-hop, the outrage came in waves. First, the jokes. Memes of Thug with cartoon rat ears, captions mocking his stay gangster sermons. Then the critics, bloggers and rappers, lined up to call him a hypocrite. And then came the worst wave of all. Silence. Some of his biggest supporters, the ones who once defended him to the end, just stopped speaking his name. But the interrogation tape wasn't the only bombshell. Around the same time, a series of leaked jail calls began circulating online private conversations that were never meant to see daylight in one. Thug allegedly bragged about planning to drop his album on the same day as Gunna's release, just to sabotage his sales. In another, he admitted he had once paid for streams to push Gunna's numbers higher, only to consider pulling the same stunt for himself when his own music started to slip. These weren't lyrics. These were raw, unfiltered words straight from his mouth, and they painted a picture that was hard to defend. To fans, it sounded like betrayal stacked on betrayal. Gunna, once his protege, had already been cast out of the culture for snitchy. Now, here was Thug, the man who exiled him, plotting behind the scenes, trying to block him, undermine him, even while pretending to uphold loyalty in public. The contradictions were staggering. In interviews, Thug declared his only enemy was betrayal. On calls, he was strategizing ways to trip up the people who once called him brother. That's the danger of leaks. They don't just expose secrets, they expose hypocrisy, and the culture thrives on hypocrisy. For years, Thug gained power by standing on one side of the code. Now, the leaks suggested he was no different from those he condemned. The fallout spread fast. Street rappers who once defended him began to question his stance. You can't talk loyalty every day and then move like that behind closed doors. Fans who once wore slime like a badge now whispered that their king was no different from the rats he mocked. Even academics and bloggers who made careers off analyzing rap beef admitted it was hard to spin this one. And looming over it, all was the simplest, deadliest question. If Thug could spend 2 hours with police, if he could plot against his own team, then what did loyalty really mean to him? It wasn't just about his case anymore. It was about the culture itself, a culture that says doing time earns respect, but talking ends careers. A culture that cheered when Gunna was thrown out, but didn't know what to do when their king faced the same accusations. For Thug, the damage was already done. Every call, every leak, every headline chipped away at the myth. His sermons about loyalty now sounded like punchlines. His crown, once untouchable, suddenly felt fragile. And the cruelest part, he had built this empire on his words. Now, it was his words that were tearing it down. So, where does the story go from here? If part 1 was about the code that crowned him, part 2 is about the leaks that exposed him. And that leaves us with one final chapter, the collapse of the code itself, because if even young Thug can't live up to the rules he preached, then maybe the rules were never real to begin with. By the time the interrogation footage and jail calls spread across the internet, one thing was clear. Young Thug was no longer just fighting a case. He was fighting perception, and perception in hip-hop moves faster than the truth. The culture had turned the no-snitch code into an idol, something bigger than music, bigger than talent. And now, the man who once embodied it was standing on shaky ground. For years, Thug had been the example others pointed to. See, that's how you do it. Solid, loyal, gangster. But in the wake of the leaks, the same voices that praised him were quick to sharpen their knives, and it wasn't just random fans online. Street rappers who had once defended him began hinting that his obsession with calling others rats was a cover for his own fear. Commentators who built their brands off hip-hop loyalty codes suddenly asked whether the whole thing was a scam from the beginning. Even fellow Atlanta artists, people who once treated Thug as untouchable, started distancing themselves. That's the brutal math of the industry. You can be a genius, a hitmaker, even a cultural icon. But if your story no longer matches your image, the game eats you alive. And young Thug wasn't the first. Think about Bobby Shmurda. He sat down, did his time, came home to applause. Fans respected him more than ever. But the industry moved on without him. His integrity stayed intact, but his momentum vanished. On the other side, look at 6ix9ine. He openly bragged about cooperating with police, wore the snitch label like armor, and still pulled numbers, but became a clown in the process. Two extremes, both punished in different ways. So where does that leave Thug? Stuck between two worlds, not respected as the last solid one, not shameless enough to spin snitching into a circus. Instead, stranded in the middle, and the middle is the most dangerous place to be. Because here's the dirty secret. The culture preaches loyalty, but the industry rewards chaos. Labels make money off beef, off betrayal, off leaks. Fans click more for drama than they ever do for music. And every time the culture crowns someone the realest, it's only a matter of time before that crown is tested, cracked, or destroyed. Young Thug's downfall isn't just about one interrogation or a handful of leaked calls. It's about what happens when an entire industry builds its foundation on a code that no one can realistically uphold. Everyone says, don't snitch. Everyone says, stay solid. But the second the stakes are life sentences, money, or freedom, that code crumbles. And the people who cheer it on from the outside, they're not the ones facing those choices. That's the tragedy of Thug's story. He lived by a code that was never truly designed for survival in the modern world. It was designed for myth, for legend, for branding. And legends are only legends until the tape rolls. Today, young Thug sits in a strange limbo. Too famous to fade quietly, too compromised to return as the hero he once was. Every new leak, every new rumor pushes him further from the throne he once held. The same fans who crowned him now scroll past him, chasing the next spectacle. That's where the culture itself has to answer hard questions. If loyalty really mattered, would Bobby Shmurda have been left behind? If betrayal really ended careers, why does 6ix9ine and still have an audience? And if the code is real, then how do you explain young Thug, the man who lived it louder than anyone, now drowning in the same accusations he used to hurl at others? Maybe the answer is uncomfortable. Maybe the code was never real. Maybe it was just another story sold to fans, another image packaged by labels, another myth that worked until it didn't. Because at the end of the day, hip-hop doesn't reward silence. It rewards noise, and right now, the loudest noise is the sound of young Thug's empire cracking under the weight of its own contradictions. So here's the final question. Is this the end of young Thug, or just another chapter in the culture's endless cycle of betrayal and reinvention? One thing is certain. If the man who once told the world never snitch can be branded with that word himself, then the code isn't sacred, it's fragile. And maybe the camera, the leak, the internet itself is the real snitch.